15 downloads. The first 15 downloads, I was excited. I said, God's doing something. I got 15 downloads. I'm so psyched. And then after that, it's like it just blew up extravagantly. It blew up so much, guys. I'm telling you. It literally went boom. And that was the end of it. I'm like, wow. I never thought, and she never thought we'd be this humongous yet. I didn't think I'd be this humongous, period. I thought I'd just be a small podcaster. I have like 10, 20 people who listen to me each and every week. I wasn't expecting, 12 countries a month or like 15 different sources where I'm at, because I'm technically on all these different sources, 15 of them that I'm going to be distributing Lance and his wife-to-be Ornissa on all 15 different platforms. 15 different platforms are going to be on. That's a blessing. And so when I was faithful to little, God gave me the increase. And that's the perfect example. So we must what? One, obey God. Two, we must obey God by, two, being faithful with the little God gives us. That's the way it should have been. Those two first. And by, three, giving to God. What does the Bible say in Proverbs 3:9? Let's go to there too. Honor the Lord with what? The first fruits of your storehouse. So honor God with the first fruits of your storehouse. And that is in Proverbs 3:9. So let's go to Proverbs 3:9. And I'll read that specifically from the Word. Proverbs, there we go. I went way too fast. Proverbs chapter 3 and verse 9. Verse 9, honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first fruits of all your increase. In the King James Version says the first fruits of your storehouse. That's the big, back in the day, the storehouse or the first fruits of your increase used to be the silos. You remember the old silos back in the South? We have them down here in Ohio. They're this big giant dome, looks like a big giant rocket thing. It's called a silo. And what that silo does is it's so tall, it stores up food for the animals. And the silos where they get all their food from, so they can dig out the food out of the silo. Well, the first fruits of your silo or your storehouse back then was whatever you got in your crops, you give that to the Lord, your first fruits. And then the rest will go to you and your family and all the other people that are around you. But the first thing you do is you give a portion of your crops or your storehouse to God. Now, in this day and age, not everyone makes a profit out of their crops, their silos. So in this day and age, the first fruits of your storehouse is this. When you make that check, don't sit there and say, I'll give it to you in a minute, God. I need to pay this bill, this bill, this bill, this bill. And we need to go out to here. We need to buy this device so I can do this, this, and this. No, the first thing you should do is, Lord, here is 20% or 10% or whatever the Lord asks you to give. Here is that percent you said. I'm cutting that out. I'm putting that aside. I know church is not till Sunday, so I'm going to put that portion aside, that little portion, that portion you asked me to give to the side. And then now with the rest of what I can do, I'm going to have to pay my bills now. I'm going to pay the water bill, the garbage bill, the electric bill, the gas bill, and I'm going to go buy this machine to do this for the podcast, for this, for whatever, and we're going out to eat here. Then you do that. But first things first, you take a portion of what God asks you to give, and you take that out. You cut that out, you put that to the side, and then you do the rest of what you're doing with the rest of your money. Because if you don't give God that portion of your storehouse, then guess what? Then you're not honoring God. Then remind you again what the scriptures say. It says right here, chapter 3, chapter 3, and it's right here in verse 9. Honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first fruits of all your increase. The first fruits of your storehouse, the first fruits of your silos, or the first fruits of all of your increase. And the increase now is your paychecks, your money. For some people, it's their silos and their crops. That might be the first fruits of their increase. Back in the day, when you didn't have a lot of money, back in the day when money wasn't a big, huge thing, the first thing that you did when you gave to God, you gave your crops. You would bring in the crops to the church, and you give them as an offering. Like one person would give 2 corns, another person would give 3 tomatoes, another person would give 3 cabbages, and another person would give, 4 onions. Ugh. Onions. They're delicious, but they stink rancid. Or someone else might give 4 cucumbers, or a jar of pickles. And then they'd take those items and they'd give them back to the community who were in need, who were homeless, were in need. So back then, the first fruits of your storehouse didn't mean money like it does now. It meant the first fruits of your increase, your crops, and all the stuff that meant something to you. See, giving to God has to mean something to you. There's a scripture where it says, where one guy gave out of his lack and the other gave out of his abundance. And who it was the better giver? Well, of course, the guy who gave out of his lack. Or about the lady who gave her last mite to be able to give to the Lord. Think about that. She was the better giver because she gave out of her lack. So when you give out of your lack and you give cheerfully with a cheerful heart, God will give back to you. But you got to honor God by doing that first. That's the first thing you got to do is give out of that increase, out of your checks, back then out of your crops, your storehouse, your silos, all that stuff. You had to give out of your increase, you didn't give out of because you had to. You didn't give out of because you had a lot to. Back in that day, if you gave 3 corns to the church, that was a whole heck of a lot of money. Corn back in the day, you used to get up to 30 cents, sometimes 40 for a thing of corn, and that could buy you a whole loaf of bread back then. And loaf of breads back then were expensive. You think 30 and 40 cents now is cheap. Back then, if you had 30 or 40 cents and you got a loaf of bread, man, you were doing good. There's a friend of mine, Dr. Ken Shelton. Be aware, though. Also, I want to let you know that Dr. Ken Shelton's doing a podcast as well. He's going to be starting one on Spreaker, and it's going to be wonderful. He's already got one on Anchor, but he wants to do one on Spreaker because Anchor's more confusing than Spreaker is. So he's going to start his podcast on Spreaker. Look forward to that as well. But he went to a country once where he got off the airplane, and a little boy was talking to him, and he goes, "Hi." He goes, "And who are you?" He goes, "I'm Dr. Ken Shelton." He goes, "Can I talk to you about Jesus?" He goes, "You can't talk to me about Jesus." He goes, "Why not?" He goes, "You don't have the robe on and the hat, and you're not one of those people, and you can't talk to me because we believe in those people." He goes, "Okay." He goes, "But thank you." The little boy said, "Thank you, bye," and he left. Just before Dr. Ken Shelton was leaving, he's boarding the plane, the little boy came up to him with this big, giant Snickers bar. He goes, "I got you something." And he hands him this big, giant Snickers bar. Now, to us, that's cheap. That is cheap, and, it's not very expensive. It's like, if you go to the dollar store, like 80, 90 cents, or if you go to, like, an actual store, it's about $1.30 or something like that, so it's pretty cheap. But to him, spending all his life savings for that week on that candy bar was worth a loaf of bread to him. And he says, "I wanted to give this because you're so nice to want to talk to me about Jesus, and I couldn't do that, but I wanted to be so nice to you and say thank you and give you this." Dr. Ken said in the class when we were with him in class, he said he broke down. He just wanted to cry because all that effort it took for him to buy that candy bar just for him, that 30 cents in that country for him, was just heartbreaking because he could have used that for his family to buy food for the table and stuff. But it is what it is. God asked him to do something. He did it. He wanted to be nice. But see, back then corn and stuff was expensive. You could feed your family on a loaf, on one thing of corn. You could sell there for 30 cents and bought a whole loaf of bread for 30 cents back then. Or you could have bought the dough to bake the bread. So with that being said, it wasn't cheap, but they gave out of their first fruits, and they gave the best to God. When they gave the best to God, what happened? God gave it back to them. Pressed down, shaken together, running over, and let men give unto your bosom. So when they gave to God, God gave it to them. Now, did they always give their crops? No. They gave their time, their effort, their diligence, anything and everything they could give as an offering to the church. It's like me. I don't have a lot of money, but when I can, I like to do things with tech area. Like, for an example, I'm on the Alexa devices. I created an app for my podcast. I created a podcast, and I do all these wonderful things, and I got the ability to put Portage Community Chapel on the Alexa devices. Now, does that mean that I'm not giving to God? No, I'm giving to God all right, because I'm using what my talents are for God, and I'm putting them back into the church. I'm getting the word out there even more on all these different devices. So with that being said, I'm giving to God in my own way. And that's the way you got to do it. Whatever God asks you to do to give, you give to Him in that fashion. Whether it's money, whether it's time, whatever it is going to be a sacrifice. And a sacrifice will cut you at you deep, let me tell you. You may not have rent money one day, but God might say, give me $50, and that's all you have. And you're thinking, I'm gonna be broke. What are you talking about, God? Next thing you know it, you're being blessed. People are paying your bills, or helping you pay your bills and all this stuff, and you seem to survive again. Me and my wife never once, ever, never did not survive. We always had food. We always had a place to live, and God blessed us. Why? Because we blessed God. We did what we needed to do for the church, whether it was money, time, effort, or whatever. We gave to the church as well, and so we gave to God. When we give to God, God made sure that He made up for our lack. We never once went hungry. We never once had to starve for whoever knows. Never ever did we ever have to go hungry at all. We've never strived and starved in anything. God always provided for us because we gave to God. And see, that's a perfect example. When you give to God, God will make up for what you lack. So don't think when you got $50 and that's all you got and God's asking you to give and you ain't going to be able to pay your bills. Don't think that way. Go think that, okay, God, I am doing this for you. I love you and I want you I want to further your kingdom. So here you go. And give it to God, and God will give it back to you. With that being said, guys, that was our message for today, and I love you all. I love giving the word out. I love preaching the word to all of you here, and it's just a true blessing. And we're going to do more of that with our next selections of songs, and like I said, I got some great music from Dr. Tom Ray, and here's one of my favorite songs that he has always done back when I was harmonica man for Evangel Christian Churches, back when Dr. Tom was the worship leader. And it was just a blessing. And I actually got to play under Tom until the day Tom left Evangel to be with his next calling in God, which was a blessing. I got to be there when he started stuff. When he started as worship leader, I was there. And when he ended as worship leader, went to his new calling in Christ, I went and stayed with him there too. So I was there throughout the entire time with Dr. Tom. And it was such a blessing, let me tell you. But let's get into his next song, which is simply entitled Breakthrough by none other than Dr. Tom Ray. Enjoy Breakthrough.